Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be sewing along to Mccalls 7975. This is a cute little Mrs. Topps pattern with the front twist detail that I thought was really cute. I'm going to be following along with view B on this pattern, but feel free to make any view that you want. The only difference between them are the sleeves. I did create a preview video for this pattern, so if you want to watch that, you can click right here to watch that video. In that video, I go over the size that I'll be cutting, I talk about the fabric that I purchased, and then I also go over the directions together so that we won't be confused today when it's time to sew. So definitely check out that video if you have any of those questions. And once you have your pattern pieces cut out, your fabric cut out, please, please, please transfer all of your markings and all of your notches. Do not forget, they're really important because a lot of the circles we're going to need to reinforce, and you just want to make sure that you have all of your markings transferred so you don't miss anything that you need. So definitely take your time, transfer all your markings, transfer all your notches, and let's start sewing. To begin working on our top, the first thing that we're going to do is reinforce the large circles that we transferred. So I'm going to go ahead and flip mine over so you can see my markings. And you should have two over here at this kind of inner corner and two over here. To reinforce them, we're just going to stitch right through the large circle. So we're going to stitch about an inch above it and an inch below it. So just stitch right through, start up here about an inch away, stitch through, and then end it an inch away. So go ahead and do that for all four of these large circles that we have transferred. Let's reinforce them now. All right, before we begin, I do want to mention that I have switched out my needle. I have in a new jersey ballpoint needle since we are sewing with knits. Depending on the fabric that you're using, you could use a stretch needle, but just make sure that you have in a jersey or ballpoint or stretch needle since we are using knit fabric. To reinforce the large circles, I'm just going to use a straight stitch. Alright, so this is the first large circle that I just reinforced. You can see here that I started about an inch above it and I ended at about an inch below. So it's just going right through the large circle. So go ahead and reinforce your other three circles the same way. Alright, now that we have our large circles reinforced, I'm going to go ahead and grab my scissors and I'm going to clip right to the large circle. I'm not going to clip past my reinforced stitch though, so just clip right to the large circle and right to that stitch like so. I'll do it for all the large circles. So now that we have clipped to our large circles, this portion of fabric that's right here between the large circles, we're going to create a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem with that. So you want to go ahead and fold in 1/4 of an inch for that raw edge, and then fold in the rest for your 5/8 of an inch. And now we can go to the machine and we can stitch right along this inner fold. So let's go to the machine now and we can go ahead and stitch right along this inner fold to create our narrow hem. And we're going to do that for the other side as well. You want to just fold up a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem and stitch right along this inner fold. Now you can go ahead and stitch your other side the same way. Alright, now that we have finished off these curved edges with the 5/8 of an inch narrow hem, now we need to do a little bit more reinforcing. So I'm going to flip over to the back so you all can see. You should have transferred a curved line that was right over this opening. You probably can't see mine because I used this pen right here, so it's really not showing up, but I did transfer my markings as well as my triangle right here. I'm going to grab my pattern piece because I want to show you where I stopped at. I did not continue cutting all the way up here to this triangle. I stopped right here, maybe 1.5 inches within this curved edge. Basically, I stopped where the two lines met at. So right where the two lines met, I stopped and I continued down the other side. I didn't cut all the way up here to the triangle and then cut the other side. and have all this open. So be sure that you are stopping, and you can double check the diagram. Let me zoom in for you right here. You can see right here on this diagram, they stopped right here as well. They didn't go all the way up to that triangle. So just make sure that you stop with your cutting. Don't cut all the way up here. We're going to trim up there after we have reinforced this curved. All right, so for this step, we're going to stitch and reinforce this curved right here. So I hope that you transferred it. If not, go ahead, transfer this curve, and we're going to reinforce it the same exact way that we just reinforced the large circle. So just go to the machine, and we're going to begin stitching all the way around just to reinforce it. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, now that we have reinforced this inner curved, now I can grab our scissors or your rotary cutter, and we're going to go straight up and stop right at the triangle. So let's go ahead and do that now. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem right here along this opening. And one thing you can do to help you with easing in along the curve, you can go ahead and do a basting stitch 1/4 of an inch away from this edge. That will help you be able to ease in the fullness. Or you can just go ahead and fold up 5/8 of an inch and then fold in 1/4 of an inch of that raw edge and just go ahead and stitch close to the inner fold. So let's go ahead and just sew our narrow hem right now along this opening. All right, so I have just created a narrow hem down here on my opening, and I want to show you all this just in case you run into the same issue. I just want you to see that my 5/8 of an inch is not like perfect all the way up here around this curve. It got really tight and really small, but I still managed to get a little bit folded up there. Mine is not as perfectly curved as this illustration. So if yours, gets a little wonky up here toward the top, just do the best you can, fold in as much as you can. As long as you reinforce that, that will be an extra like stitch to help you get like a little bit more of a fold. So I just wanted to mention that and show it to you that my curve is not as perfectly even as this illustration is, but just right up here at the top, it got a little bit small, but that's all good. So we're gonna move on to the next step, and we are going to start working on this right side here first. So I'm just gonna take this bottom portion. So I just wanna show it to you now. My shirt is right sides facing up. You can see down here that this is the longer end of the bottom. This right here is the shorter end. I'm on this side, and I'm just gonna take this and fold it right sides facing. Should have transferred a notch. We're gonna pin there. And those circles that we transferred, we're gonna match those up and pin there too. Now continue pinning the rest of this together. All right, now we're gonna take it to the machine, and we're gonna go ahead and stitch from this side opening all the way to this large circle. So let's go ahead and do that stitch now. All right, now that we have this seam sewn, you can see I also finished mine off with my serger. We should have a little opening right here that we left. All right, so now we're gonna take this portion of the top and we're gonna slip it through that opening. So go ahead and grab your top, and we're gonna take it over into the opening. Like so. So again, I'll take it out and do it one more time so you all can see. We have this portion already sewn, so we're going to take this side of the front and bring it through this opening. Make sure that you are coming over and not under. So bring it over and come through the opening that we left. Pull it through. All right, so now the top should look like this. Let's move on to the next step. All right, so from this step, I'm going to flip my top to the wrong side. That way it matches the illustration. You all can refer to that as well. So from here, we're just going to do the same exact thing that we did for this side. We're going to bring these raw edges together, match up our notches, and pin in place. Okay, find your large circles and pin there. All right, so now we can go to the machine. We're going to start stitching here on the side and stitch all the way across to the large circle. Be sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end of your stitch. All right, so now that we have our twist made, I can show you what mine look like on the inside here. I went ahead, I finished off my seam allowances. The pattern instructions did say to press your seam allowance open flat. So if you wanted to finish off your seam allowances separately and then press it flat, then by all means you can do that. But I just did mine together. So now we can move on to the next step, and that is to go ahead and grab our back piece. So I have my back here, and we're gonna go ahead and pin and stitch at our shoulder seams. So with right sides facing, you want to match up your notches, pin in place, and go ahead and take it to the machine and stitch both of your shoulders. If you want to add some stabilizer, clear elastic, you can go ahead and do that. Just make sure that you put the clear elastic or the stabilizer that you're using right along the seam line. So your 5/8 of an inch stitching line should be right in the middle of your clear elastic, stabilizer, stay tape, whatever you're going to be using if you want to stabilize your shoulder seam. Just make sure that your 5/8 of an inch stitch is going right down the middle of your stabilizer. But let's go ahead and do our stitching now. All right, now that we have our shoulders sewn, you can see I also stabilized mine. The next step we want to do is to go ahead and do the hem of our back, because we've already hemmed our front when we did that 5/8 of an inch hem along that little curve opening. That was the hem for the front. So now we need to go ahead and hem the back. And to do that, we're just going to do a 5/8 of an inch narrow hem. So you can go ahead and press up 5/8 of an inch and then 1/4 of an inch on that raw edge to create your narrow hem. And then we're going to stitch close to the inner fold. So let's go ahead and do our 5/8 of an inch hem now for our back pattern piece. All right, now that we have our 5/8 of an inch hem done on our back pattern piece, now we can go ahead and put right sides together and stitch down our side seams. So let's go ahead and find our notches, pin those in place, and just pin the remaining seam. All right, once you have it pinned, you can go ahead and pin your other side seam the same way, and then we can go to the machine and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, being sure to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. All right, now that we have our side seams sewn, the next thing that we need to do is grab a needle and thread, and we want to slip stitch this end right here at a diagonal. So that way when you're wearing your shirt, you don't have nothing poking out. So just go ahead and grab a needle and thread. You just want to fold this up at a diagonal, your seam allowance only, and then just kind of stitch that up so that, like I said, when you're wearing your top, nothing's poking out at the bottom. I'm going to save that step for last when I'm done with my top. But now we can go ahead and move on to working on our neckband. So first we want to go ahead and do a stay stitch all the way around the neck edge. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so once we have our stay stitching done, and stay stitching for this pattern is done at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, not the usual 1/2 inch. As you can see, I did the usual 1/2 inch, but that's okay. After I attach the neckband, it will be in the seam allowance, so I'm not worried about that too much. But the next step is to go ahead and grab our neckband, and we're going to stitch the center seam of that together. So go ahead and grab your neckband with right sides facing. You can put a pin if you like. And we can go to the machine and we can stitch this down at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, from here, now that we have our center seam of our neckband sewn, we can open out our seam and fold it with wrong sides facing. So you want the right sides of your band to be out. All right, go ahead and fold it, and now you can take it to your ironing board and give it a good press. All right, so I'm going to begin at my notches. So I have 2 notches for the front, and I also put snips in for my shoulder. So I'm just going to start right here at the front. I'm going to line those up and pin it in place. All right, now that we have our neckband pinned in place, we can take it to the machine and go ahead and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now that we have our neckband sewn on, the next thing for us to do is to start working on our sleeves. So let's go ahead and grab our sleeves now. For our sleeve, the first thing that we're going to do is put the sleeves right sides facing. And we're going to stitch down the seam of the sleeve. So find your notches and go ahead and pin in place. You can go ahead and pin your other sleeve the same way, and then we can take it to the machine, and we're going to start at the top, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and stitch at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I said that I was going to do view B sleeve, but I actually did view D, so I have the long sleeve for my top. So go ahead and fold your other sleeve the same way, pin it, and now we can take them both to the machine and stitch them down. All right, now that we have our sleeves sewn, we can go ahead and do a narrow hem for our sleeve. I do want to mention though that if you are familiar with the flat sleeve method, you can definitely install your sleeves using that method. The pattern has you doing the side seam of the shirt and then doing the sleeves like this. But if you are familiar and you know how to install your sleeve before you sew down your side seams, that way you can sew them in one continuous stitch. If you know how to do that method, you can definitely use that for this top. But I've already gone following the instructions of the pattern. So next, let's go ahead and do our narrow hem. So we're just gonna fold up 5/8 of an inch and then fold in 1/4 inch of the raw edge, the same that we've been doing for the hem of the top. Go ahead and create your narrow hem and stitch that in place for both of your sleeves. All right, now that we have the hems of both of our sleeves sewn, now we can go ahead and install our sleeve into our top. So I'm just gonna grab my sleeve here and double check to make sure that I have the right sleeve. And you will know because the single notch on your sleeve matches up to the single notch on the front of your top, and the double notch on your sleeve matches up to the double notch on the back of your top. So here's my top here, and this is a double notch, so that won't work. So let me flip this over. So the double notch is back here, and here's this double notch. So I'm going to grab my seams, I'm going to pin in place. Gonna bring it through. So this is why I mentioned if you are familiar with the flat sleeve method, you can definitely do that with this top. It would be a lot easier. You won't be setting the sleeve in like this. You would just be sewing it flat and then sewing down the underarm seam and the side seam in one continuous stitch. But it's okay, we can just go ahead and pin this in place. Make sure that you match up your notches, match up your circles that you transferred. I have a notch right here that matches up to my shoulder seam, so I'm going to pin that in place. If you transferred a circle, then match that up to your shoulder seam. All right, once you have your sleeve pinned, we can go to the machine, stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then finish off your seam. Do the same thing for your other sleeve. All right, now that we have our sleeves installed, the last thing that you want to do is go back and do that slip stitch right here diagonally to make sure that we tack up the side seam of our top. And I also forgot to mention that if you wanted to do an edge stitch right here along your neckband, that's an option that you can do as well. So once you have all those steps done, you are all done with this top. All right, y'all, so that is all for the sew along. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down for me below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on social at Brittany J. Jones, and also visit the blog at brittanyjjones.com. I'll see you all in the next video. Blessings, everyone. Bye.